All right, so I'm Christian,
And I'm Janelle.
and today we're going to go ahead and present the phylum Priapulida.
Okay, so I'm just going to give a general overview of what we're going to be talking about in this presentation. So first, we're going to talk about the taxonomy and the phylogeny, and then we're going to talk about the major features of this phylum, their support and how they move, the ontology and their life cycle slash development, where they're normally found and what they feed on, and then we're going to dive into specific families within this phylum.
So to go over some of the taxonomy and phylogeny, Priapulida falls within the kingdom Animalia, and it branches off and separates from some of the earlier phylums that we studied earlier in the semester, such as the Poriferans, Ctenophores, and Cnidarians. And specifically, it's grouped with the phylums that are known as the Ecdysoans. And so these are, like the nematodes, the arthropods, and for those of you who know what the water bears are, the tardigrades. So there are currently 16 living species within this phylum and 14 extinct species. There's three families, and we're going to go over them. They are Priapulidae, Tubelucidae, and Macabidae. So the origin of the name, it originates from the Greek god Priapus. In Greek mythology, he was the god of fertility, and he was known to have a large male reproductive body part. And because this animal resembles that, has a striking resemblance to that, they named it after him, Priapus. That's why it's called Priapulida. So to go over some of the anatomy, so priapulids, they're cylindrical and they're vermiform. So vermiform just means that they're somewhat worm-shaped, and they typically tend to be between 0.55 millimeters long and 20 centimeters long. So to go over some of the specific parts, at the anterior end of it, we have what's called an introvert. So it's spiny and toothed, and it's retractable. So this allows it to anchor and also capture its prey. Below that is an area that's a little bit thinner. It almost looks like a neck. So we call that the collar. And that leads then to what we imagine as the body. And that's actually called the trunk or the abdomen. At the very posterior end, near the anus, is the caudal appendage. And overall, the priapulids, they're covered in a thin, flexible covering that's called a cuticle. And so this cuticle is regularly shed. And so that's actually why it's grouped in with the ecdysoans, because remember, they typically shed their outer layer in favor of a new one. Their cuticle also has sometimes will have spines and tubercles, which will its importance we'll discuss in a bit.
Okay, so this phylum loves or tends to live in shallow waters, particularly near the shore and soft sediment. Um, these organisms reside near the bottom, and this is where they feed and reproduce. Surprisingly, they're predators, and they typically feed on soft-bodied invertebrates such as polychaete worms. One of the unique features of priapulids is its tooth-lined cuticle-covered pharynx. So basically, when it feeds, its pharynx extends out of the introvert to grab the prey. And once the prey is captured, the introvert closes and digestion begins in the midgut. I also wanted to note that the anus is on the posterior side. And in the bottom picture, you can see the extensible pharynx. Um, oops. I also wanted to talk about the Priapulus caudidus, which is the picture shown, and he is clearly in the sediment, meaning that they are benthic organisms. It's also known as the cactus worm, and just shortly you're going to see how they move. So before I get into the details of their support and motion, I wanted to show a quick video on how they move. So you can see as the introvert extends out, and it's all very, very quickly and very smooth. It's kind of freaky but cool at the same time. So the body structure of priapulids is supported by a hydrostatic skeleton. So what this means is that fluid pressure within the body helps maintain its form and allows for movement. The movement itself is facilitated by circular and longitudinal muscles located along the trunk. These muscles work together to enable the worm to move through its environment. Additionally, spines and tubercles on its cuticle help the worm move across soft sediment, aiding in locomotion. Oops. Okay, so the priapulids can either be male or female, and these organisms are free spawning, meaning they release their gametes into the water where external fertilization occurs. And once that fertilization happens, the develops in soft sediment and they feed on dead organic matter. A notable feature of their development is the presence of a lorica, which, as Christian mentioned, they shed regularly. This lorica is eventually replaced by a cuticle, and this happens when they undergo metamorphosis into adulthood. Uh, I Another thing to notice or mention is that the larval development process can take anywhere from 1 to 2 years. And uh, this picture on the right is basically um, a different types of larval and their stages in development within this phylum. And this picture was taken from this research article specifically looking into when they develop their tooth. So the first family that we're going to be talking about is the family Priapulida, which is a family that consists of large worm-like organisms, typically ranging from 4 to 20 centimeters in length. And these organisms are superficially annulated, which means that their body appears to be divided into rings, a lot like an earthworm. A distinctive feature of this family is their caudal appendage, which often resembles a grape-like cluster of fluid-filled sacs or a muscular extension with circular hooks. These hooks aid in their movement and anchoring within the soft sediment. Some examples of this species within this family include Acanthopriapulus, the Halicryptus, the Priapulopsis, and Priapulus. The images here show Priapulus bicaudus on the left with its proboscis and trunk rings visible, and the Halicryptus on the right shows the ventral nerves cord.
All right, so the second family we'll mention is the Tubelucidae. So these ones are considered a smaller family. They're less than 2 millimeters long. These don't have any annulation on them, and the caudal appendage is variform or worm-like, and it's also muscular. These tend to live in warmer tropical waters, and also in shallow waters as well. So the third family we'll mention is the Macabeidae. So these are also considered a smaller group, with being less than 3 millimeters long. So the abdomen has rings of tubercles going around, and it also lacks a caudal appendage. Instead of a caudal appendage, they have these posterior longitudinal ridges with hooks. And so that basically helps them to burrow into the sand through the posterior end. And they are often found in the Mediterranean Sea and the Indian Ocean. Such examples would be Macabeus tentaculatus and Macabeus serratus. So we got a couple of questions here. So the first one is when the larvae metamorphosize into adults, what is the lorica, that outer lining, replaced with as the outer protective layer when they become adults? And of course, the answer would be a cuticle.
Yeah. And the second question that we came up with is which Priapulida family lacks a caudal appendage? And that would be the family Macabidae. Here are our references, and thank you for listening. We hope you learned something.